I was born and raised in China until I was 5, and I've been living in the US for 10 years now as a current sophomore in high school. One of the biggest things I've noticed between Chinese and American students isn't the differences in their work ethic, intelligence, or talent, but rather it's how they're taught to think about their future. And what I mean by this is if you think about the college admissions process here in the United States, right, you're free to apply to any colleges that you want, and the colleges that you do apply to are based off of your own decisions. However, in terms of the college application process in China, it's very much different because what they have to do is at the end of senior year, all Chinese students have to take a college entrance exam known as the Gaokao. The score that you get on the college entrance exam is what's going to determine which college or university that you go to. The higher you score on that exam, the higher your chances of getting into a better college, university. However, the exam itself is very different from like a standard SAT or ACT that we would take here in the US because it's not just testing about math, reading, and writing, but there's actually three core subjects that everyone has to take, and then one primary elective, followed by two secondary electives that you are free to choose, with a total of 750 points. The exam can last anywhere from 2 to 4 days, depending on the province, and each subject that's being tested can range anywhere from 90 to 2.5 hours. Compared to the SAT or ACT is just so much more and it just takes so much longer to do. Essentially, the score that the students get on the Gaokao exam directly determines which college that they can apply to and the jobs that follow after that. That's why the Gaokao is so prestigious and is so valued within China's society. Pretty much from the moment that you step into first grade, second grade, all the way up to your junior, senior year, each year you're just preparing yourself for that final Gaokao exam. And every year builds up on top of each other. So it's very common for Chinese students to just spend their entire summers at summer programs that are helping them hone their reading and math skills and problem solving skills, all of that stuff, so they can have a higher potential of scoring better on the exam itself. And I think the biggest problem with that is that the students are so caught up in this process of trying to maximize their score because that's essentially what's going to determine the job that they have or their future, that they don't really have much time to really explore their true passions and to do all these other extracurriculars that the students here in America have the opportunity to do. There are clubs in school that you can go to. A lot of people play sports, like during spring and fall seasons. You can try so many different things like content creation or learning how to code or just science research, other school programs, all of that stuff that's not really seen with Chinese students because their main goal is to do well on the exam itself. So, in turn, the hours that they're spending on studying for the exam is the time that they're also sacrificing, chasing their own passions and the things that truly excite them. And I don't think that either society is better than the other because both have their distinct ways of functioning and the structure itself is pretty clear. However, I do think I've benefited from seeing both sides of society because growing up in China as a young kid, a lot of discipline was surrounding me. But here in America, it's really taught me more than just discipline, but also that I have the ability to continuously explore the passions that I truly find myself curious about and to just chase after those interests that I have and continue to grow them. So I think there is a balance between the two. Sometimes I think to myself that the life I would be living if I still stayed in China, it would just be so different from how it is today. And I'm really grateful to be here today. So, out of all of these things, I think the one biggest difference between Chinese and American students and their society is that If you're a student in China, then you're sacrificing more of your childhood and the time that you have to really find and go after your passions for this higher potential to get into a better college and potentially get a better job, right? I think as a student in China, it's very future oriented. It's like there's so much pressure growing up because that there's only this one exam that will determine your future and how your life is going to be. So it's pretty much all or nothing, and that immense amount of pressure is not something that everyone can undertake. Whereas compared to students are more carefree, all stress builds up as college applications are coming and undergoing. How I compare the two education systems holistically, I realize that the American education system really has more freedom that's built in, and it has and comparably less pressure compared to if you were a student living in China, because your future isn't determined by how you do on the SAT or the ACT. There's so many other factors that will go into your college application, and there's so many other paths that you could take as well. You could explore all of these passions because you have time for it, and you're not pressured by so many others and those around you to continuously have to be focused on school and school only. So that kind of leads to these two different pathways that eventually just make up these two distinct education systems. And I think having spent time in both places, really these two differences are still what I constantly think about from day to day. But I think as a whole, it has really benefited me to see both sides. Because you see both sides, you have a better understanding of the world around you and where you stand in terms of, school. And so a lot of the opportunities that I'm pursuing today, all these passions I'm chasing, my science research, all of it is pretty much coming from the time that I've spent in America. However, the ability to just keep going with it, even when there's failure that comes, and just sometimes when I don't really feel like working, it always just reminds me of the values that China society really puts emphasis on, and it allows me to continue to grow and improve as a person. So the biggest difference about China and American students isn't how one is working harder than the other, but rather how they're taught to think about success and the differences in their education systems as a whole. I definitely think there's something worth learning from both.